Millfield. The morning air carried the feeling of a gentle aroma of wild flowers and the smell of aged wood. Emma Wilson, of 8 years old, crouched down next to a path made of gravel that headed into the hills where as she reached out, her hand was shaking slightly. With regard to the German shepherd that was hurt, the dog was lying in the tall grass, dozing off. Not much movement, only a flick of a small flare of agony behind her tail and a tail. The fur was matted with blood, and the eyes were brown. Her respiration was slow and steady along one leg. Her movement was slow and shallow, irregular, remarks spoken in a whisper with the intention of even. She was uncertain as to whether or not the dog could. You could hear her ripping off her jacket and draped it, sheltering her from the beast by placing it over it. A gust of wind, and then with trembling fingers, Emma retrieved the teeny-tiny flip phone used by her mother, just in case she had given her, and she had called the residence of her mother, Karen Wilson, the town's modest animal hospital's veterinary nurse. Clinic arrived in their location a few minutes later. It was a dusty station wagon that they loaded together. Into the back of Karen's neck was the injured dog, muttering some brief instructions while Emma was present, held the dog's head in her lap, and cradled it, speaking in a low voice. "You are safe now." They worked at the clinic, and they said, "You're fine." The dog's rear limb was broken in a short amount of time. There are several cuts and indications of serious. Due to tiredness, they were unable to locate her. It was a result of the absence of a collar and a microchip. On the other hand, from the moment Emma first noticed Max, she had already decided on a name for herself. Emma had rescued Max, but he was more than simply a dog. She was a tale that was just waiting to be told. And, while Emma was unaware of at the time, saving, the way her life would unfold would be altered by Max. The first few days at the clinic will remember forever. Max hardly moved her leg at all, and she was calm. Both her body and her splints were securely bandaged, while wrapped in blankets that had a subtle odor of lavender, antiseptic, and she did not make a sound. She did not complain. Rather, she merely observed, and Emma was always present. She had always been there. Even when she was a young child, she had a deep affection for animals, would tenderly press butterflies against her body, palms and converse with it, as if it were a stray cat, dated back to the past. Although she had disappeared recently, Emma had been quiet for only a few months before to this. Lost her father as a result of an unexpected illness, an absence that manifested itself as a dull aching in every single act that she did when she discovered Max, in pain and by themselves at the side of the road. Her internal state underwent a change, and there was no fear, no doubt, just a silence. Recognition, as if she were experiencing Max's suffering, a reflection of her own self. Emma did not merely. You should feel sad for Max because she liked her from the beginning. Immediately following the conclusion of the school day, the first thing that Emma would do is go to the clinic. Cross-legged, she would sit in place of going home, while sitting next to Max's box and reading books. Sometimes it's noisy, and other times it's story time. Tales on the subject of wild animals and their loyalty. In the stillness, she shared her thoughts about the day, manner in which youngsters behave when they are aware. Even if that is the case, someone is listening. Someone is unable to respond at the beginning. Max only momentarily blinked when Emma got close to him. However, over time, something caused her eyes to alter. Emma began to follow her around the room as she left. The girl's voice caused the listener's ears to perk up. The voice that Emma had one day when she dropped her book. As he bent down to pick it up, Max made a gentle sound. Emma froze and grinned at hearing the thump of her tail. That day onward, her cheeks were so wide that they hurt. Max started to alter, and she started sitting up more. Attempted to stand, she led Emma to brush her. In addition, she leaned her head against the fur. The love of Emma had made its way to the girl's lap. As Max struggled to maintain his position, "A reason why she is getting better," Karen murmured. One evening, Emma opened her eyes and took a few strokes. Hearing Max's voice through the container and saying, in a gentle tone, "You're no longer alone, and also I am not." By the beginning of spring, Max had regained the majority of her abilities, including her limp, had become more robust. Her coat had become thicker, and Neither of her eyes were veiled with tears anymore. Ached despite the fact that flyers were posted and checked with each and every shelter in the area. No. As a result, no one ever came forward to claim her, despite the fact that it is not even necessary to. You should talk about it and publicly welcome Max into. Emma stood in front of the family that afternoon, nearby the examination table in the medical center. When her mother was going for her regular checkup, on Max Karen's hands, she moved with great care yet. Over the dog's stomach, a momentary pause was observed. A sly grin appeared on her face as she stared at Emma. "Come here, sweetheart," she commanded him with her eyes. I said while reaching out to grab Emma's hand, the act of directing it to the same location. "Tell me whether." Emma turned her head to the side and said, "You feel something." The head. At first, I was fascinated because there was nothing except the gradual ascent and decrease of Max's income. Respiration, but then a very small ripple, a gentle fluttering sound similar to a heartbeat. She looked around with wide eyes and asked, "Is that?" "Yes, Max is going to have," Aaron said with a smile. Emma remained motionless and stunned by the puppies. What a marvel that was. Her hand was resting over it. The spot, and her entire face became illuminated with. She had not experienced the light in a very long time. It was as if she was whispering, "Puppies," as if that night, Emma, the word itself, was a magical tool. Constructed a bed on the floor adjacent to Max's room. Beneath a blanket, she curled up in a crate and laid down, rubbing her cheek against the warm side of Max's face. Room was quiet, but Emma's voice could be heard. "I'll help you," she whispered in a steady motion. "I promise that I will look after them well," she said. A gentle sigh was let out by all of my heart, Max, and, in that instant, moved closer to one another under gentle. With a steady and soft breath, a promise was fulfilled. From a little girl to a dog, a sacred and silent, and indestructible, the morning began just like any other. There was additional sunlight that penetrated the casting glass for the windows of the Wilson home. There were golden streaks all over the hardwood. Emma was seated on the floor of the kitchen table, idly attempting to stir her spoon around in a bowl of, listening to the low buzz of her food while eating cereal. The mother getting ready for the day that Max laid. By the window, her bloated stomach was beginning to rise, as well as falling in a repetitive and slow manner. Everything appeared to be calm and predictability. A sudden dull sound came from the direction of safety. After a thump coming from the living room, there was a whimper. Emma's spoon, which is sharp and shattered. She leaped up and clattered to the ground as she did so. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. Karen was already putting a squeeze on the situation. Emma was unfamiliar with her face to begin with. To Max, Emma yelled as she ran after her companion. What they discovered was that she had slumped on her body was ragged, and her breathing was ragged. She kicked one of her hind legs, which was shaking, out feebly before remaining motionless, Karen said, lowered herself to her knees, and then began to check the pulse of Max. Her eyes are searching for indications. In the event that something or anything remained constant. "Emma, get the emergency kit now," she said to herself. The tone of her voice was calm but tense. Emma said. While she stared at Max's face, she froze for a moment. Then, with glazed eyes, they turned and ran away. She fumbled her fingers as she walked down the corridor. As she yelled out, the lock of the kit began to move. When it comes to voice breaking in the following few, it seemed like only a few minutes had passed in a haze. "Emma, the noise of the car engine is in your hands." Occupied the back seat and held Max's head in their arms. In her lap, as they headed in the direction of the hospital. "Stay with me," she hushed in a whisper, stroking the fur back from the face again and over again. But deep inside, Max's face said, "You have to stay." Someplace within, under the surface of the hope-fear, had started to germinate. She was able to see it in. The hands of her mother were trembling ever so slightly. She was able to sense it in the manner of Max's. Although respiration slowed down and became sluggish, it was something that Emma did not want to believe. Audaciously, a hushed voice from within her muttered. It was the phrases that she could not stand to hear. There was a terrible, terrible something going on. The aroma of antiseptic was present in the clinic. Emma was trembling as she stood in the corridor for dread. Her arms were wrapped around her body in a taut manner. By way of the glass doors, she was able to see a peek of Max Limp, who was completely still, made a hasty entrance into the emergency room. The doors slammed with a final bang that made the door slam shut. Suddenly, her flinching Heron vanished from behind them, participating in the team of veterinary professionals as they worked so quickly that machines began to beep. Instructions were conveyed in a terse manner by voices. Emma was able to make out part of her mother's face, the move she had practiced, but figure out. Feeling desperate, everything seemed to be far away. Emma is experiencing the nightmare of another person. Her forehead was pressed against the chilly window, looking for Max amidst all of the mayhem that the glass was smeared with her tears and her breath. Splashed all over it, the woman did not move at all. When a nurse attempted to help her, she hardly noticed. Lead her to a chair where she won't be able to hear the words of solace being offered to her are all she needs. A hope that was beyond all reasonable expectations. There is hope beyond everything that is real. And the door. Erin came out of the door first. Her face appeared, wet and pallid, with tears falling silently behind them. A man who Emma hadn't seen in years. He was her. Dr. Alan Myers, as the clinic's leader, was followed. Experienced veterinarian who had arrived on an emergency. Emma looked up, her eyes giggling with excitement. It was not necessary for them to ask her the question. Karen was able to recognize it in their expressions. Emma, her sweetheart, knelt down next to her. She shook her head and muttered, "No, she should not. Was fine. She was going to be okay. I'm so happy for her. I'm sorry, Karen, but Max didn't make it." She choked. Emma fell to her feet as the world began to crumble. Down on her knees, crying into her mother's arms, grieving that was too heavy for the body to bear. Max was gone, but then words Max was gone. Something peculiar, emotion behind the vehicle. Dr. Myers had a very small towel in her arms. As he crouched down, he held a wrapped gift in his arms. With a soft voice, "We were able to deliver one. But there's no puppy," he said. "But there's no. Emma, we're trying everything we can think of." Her words was heard through her tears as she blinked. "Can I hold her, Sarah? It's hardly heard. Can I hold it?" Karen paused for a moment before delivering a brief. Dr. Myers patiently positioned the teeny-tiny object, put the puppy into Emma's waiting hands, and formed a shape. Had fur that was silky smooth and was incredibly little. And his limbs were moist, his chest was lifeless, but he felt more like a memory than he did like life. Emma took her time as she sat on the chilly tile floor. She pressed the puppy while she was curled up around him, her chest in a gentle manner, and started caressing her through the towel in a gentle and steady manner. Strokes in an effort to warm a body that contains. "I made a vow to her that she would not do so." Muttered, "I made a vow that I would look after." After those minutes had passed, Emma observed no change. Would not stop. She rubbed more vigorously and whispered, "If he could kindly come back, please do so loudly." There was no lowering of her arms. Just a little bit. Her hands slowed down her voice. Weary and dejected, I fell into stillness and said, "I tried." She whispered, barely audible, "I truly made an effort." And then something went on inside. Emma drew the dog closer to her as she pulled her away, squeezing him close against her body. Her chest erupted in a sob, and she cried out in shock, begun to cry out in a deep, agonizing sob that rocked her diminutive build. One tear rolled down her cheek and fell to the ground, affixed to the fur of the dog and gradually traced the shape of his teeny-tiny face, which was completely still. Then, a glimmer that was so faint that she almost. Emma's gaze seized her breath as she seemed to miss it, expanded yet another twitch, followed by a feeble wet. With a squeal, Dr. Myers hurriedly approached Karen. The vets let out a gasp and moved immediately, but Emma remained motionless, gazing in awe as life unfolded before her. She went back to the weak body she had initially, crying her eyes out. She was on the verge of giving up. Nonetheless, this time they were filled with something. She hushed. "You came back," with a sense of assurance. As she drew in closer, she gently put her lips to the wetness in his skull, said, "Your name is Charlie." One could say that the hours that followed were a dream that is frail and in which every sound, every little glimmer of motion carried the entire Charlie was hurriedly thrown into the Weight of Hope, a rather modest neonatal unit at the clinic. Temperature-controlled environment with a limit, typically reserved for those who are the most defenseless. Patients. He was incorporated within a glass enclosure. Incubator that is hardly larger than a laundry stall. Wires and basket tubes were monitored on a daily basis. Each and every heartbeat serves as a minute heating. Pad encircled his body and emitted a gentle light. Karen explained that she lavished him with warmth. Everything he said in a very low and steady voice. He is required to maintain a consistent temperature, necessitates feeding without interruption, and, despite all, support for the respiratory system. Emma listened to the truth that survival is not a given. She did not exhibit any signs of flinching or blinking. She didn't cry. She only nodded in agreement from that. During every single moment, she was by Charlie's side. Second, she was permitted to be following the incident. She would rush to the clinic and pull a pull-along, take a seat next to the incubator and hit the button. While putting her hands on the glass, she spoke with a quiet, steady, and full of whispering. Something fierce. "You're doing great," they said. "I'm just going to keep breathing," she informed him. Here, she would occasionally read stories out loud of valiant heroes and creatures who had been lost too. At other times, they were able to find their way home. Just now, she observed her breath synchronizing with his, a little chest that flutters in the night while her. The mother was responsible for the feedings that lasted for 2 hours. In her bed, Emma remained awake and stared at the ceiling while uttering prayers in a hushed whisper. Charlie slowly and agonizingly marched into the darkness. His heartbeat started to shift, and it grew. His legs kicked just a little bit, and he was stronger. Greater the shade of dark blue that surrounded his. One evening, the nose and paws started to lighten up. When she came, she discovered him sitting up. When it was barely trembling inside the incubator, when he saw her, his eyes widened and he looked at her. There was a single thump from the tip of his tail against the cozy blanket that Emma continued to chuckle through. Through her tears, Charlie was able to breathe. In this, the first time he wasn't battling by himself after a few days, Charlie's struggle turned into weeks. For life turned out to be a simple miracle. Something was no longer taking place in front of Emma's eyes. Limited to the confines of the incubator, Charlie was relocated to a relaxing area of the medical center and cage stuffed with plush blankets at a low density walls and the reassuring aroma of Emma's laundry bag. That he was still in need of a sweatshirt around although he was more powerful now than he had been before. On a daily basis, Emma sat with her legs crossed. Her presence, which was calm and solid, was alongside him. She was in frequent communication with him at times, providing him with updates on her day on occasion, merely telling them, "You are safe, you are safe." In ways that Charlie responded to her, he said, "Loved." That left the entire crew in a state of admiration to him. His teeny-tiny head would raise the moment she did so. Walked inside the room, his gaze following her there. Every action she took when she took a reach inside the enclosure, he moved closer and pressed. The tip of his tail was pressed against her palm. With a sigh of contentment, Heron also observed it. On a certain afternoon, she observed Emma assisting. Charlie moves toward the target with a few shaky steps. "I've never seen anything like it before." As she whispered, "He is familiar with you, Emma." Emma was conscious of the fact that you're his person. As they were alone together in the peaceful hours, not only was a new friendship being formed between, yet Charlie was not there for the goal of survival. Even though he was only a puppy, he was Max's legacy. The second opportunity for Emma to fulfill her commitment. Every feeding, every insignificant step, and every nuzzle, in opposition to her hand, was evidence that genuine love has the power to restore what was lost. Once after a long day, I felt completely broken. Yet another session of mild physical activity. Charlie, on the other hand, cuddled up next to Emma, as he dozed off with his head snuggled in his chest. Below her arm, she cast her gaze downward to him. Her hand was resting on his heartbeat. "And I've seen it. I have you," she muttered, "and we have each other." And for the very first time in a number of years. When Emma didn't have the impression that she was healing on one's own day-by-day dread that was released. With its hold, Emma started to become aware of the small. He was overjoyed to see Charlie's tail wag at her. It was his little bark that became stronger over time. Every day, the pain of losing Max was unrelenting. Even while it was still there, it now came with warmth. By this point, she was no longer only rescuing him. We're maturing together in the placid environment. Something started to happen in the rhythm of their days. Rather than abruptly shift in a leisurely manner like the light of the morning making its way into a space that was previously dark. Emma no longer held her breath before each and every. Charlie's motion steadily increased as time went by. Steadier, his eyes brighter, and with each passing moment, just a little bit of success, his first bark is first. After a clumsy pursuit of a toy, Emma experienced a fragment of her ego started to recover, and they were, beyond the point of merely living, they were relearning how to live as Charlie from the beginning. When Emma, the clumsy little puppy, grew, she also grew. She used to be able to fit him in the palm of her hand. Now scurrying over the floor of the clinic. Ears that are large for his head paws, they're constantly one step ahead of his equilibrium. He was brimming with vitality that is filled with life, that is always full of. Because of her love for Emma, she gently trained him, commemorated each and every minor achievement, and left a photograph of Max on Charlie's bedside table. In such instances, when Charlie was snuggled up next to, almost as if she could sense Max's spirit, Emma could. There, too, looking with pride and contentment while Emma was brushing Charlie's hair in the afternoon, she gazed up at her when she had a thick, robust coat. "I want to be a mother," she whispered to her mother. "Someday, I hope to be a vet like you." Heron turned too. His eyes widened, and then he kneeled down next to her. "You already have the most," said the daughter. She remarked that brushing was a crucial aspect. A heart that was hidden behind Emma's ear, Emma's hair. Emma grinned as she read the words, "Never gives up." When the anguish of the situation deepened within her, Max's loss was still present, but it was no longer resisted her because Charlie was no longer there. In this location, and with each breath he took Emma, she did not remember what she had pledged to avoid, specifically to Max, but also to herself, and that there was already a silent promise about to shape Emma's life would eventually become somewhat full with vigilance, bravery, and determination.